in the interim period.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting to see the team that they're both running. You know, they are currently undefeated in the tournament, and they're in a little bit of a different order, unfortunately. But, you know, there's 2 Zacian, there's 2 Grimmsnarl, there's 2 Charizard, there's 2 Incineroar, there's 2 Groudon, and there's 2 Gastrodon. So we're looking at a perfect Sun Mirror in the Series 12 metagame, which if you would have asked me yesterday, you know, what mirror I was expecting to see play out in this tournament, I would tell you it would have been a Kyogre Zacian mirror and not the Groudon variant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Zacian and Kyogre has been consistently one of the top restricted duos used in the format. So to see that it's Zacian and Groudon that are undefeated facing head-to-head with each other, you know, it was bound to happen eventually. But I would have expected the Zacian and Kyogre mirror to happen first. Yeah, and it's not the only undefeated team with these Pokemon at this point. I mean, Joe Ugarte, last round, we featured him on stream, and he also was running a Groudon Sun team with the Gastrodon, who we got to see Dynamax even, which is always really fun. So, you know, it's hard to say going into game 1 whether or not these trainers are thinking of making a play like that. I think the thing that you have to watch out for, both when you're watching a mirror matchup like this and when you're playing a mirror matchup like this, are the differences. And, you know, even though there aren't any at the team preview screen, you have to assume that both these trainers have tailored these Pokemon to their personal, like, preferences, their personal play styles. And as we enter this game, I can't wait to see what those preferences are and how they're going to shape this matchup. Yeah, especially when you think about Grimmsnarl being on both teams, right? We can talk about that for hours, but let's go ahead and talk about round 5 of the Salt Lake City Regional Championships, as we are going to see Charizard and Incineroar here coming out from Chongjun, and we have Grimmsnarl and Charizard here for Brock. All right, well, that's already one difference. We have the Grimmsnarl out on the field for Brock and the Incineroar out on the field for Chongjun. And usually when you see a Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, especially in this kind of matchup, you're expecting it to have that light screen or that reflect to lower the damage on the field. You know, maybe it has a move like Fake Out, maybe it has something like Thunder Wave. I think that Chongjun did a great job of leading that Incineroar, as this one turn of Fake Out we're going to see most likely on the field, as there are no switches, will give Chongjun the opportunity to, you know, stop that Grimmsnarl from attacking this turn and give Charizard a chance to maybe get some damage down on the field before things may get a little bit interesting. Well, we are going to see a Gigantamax right away here from Chongjun, going ahead and using that massive Charizard. And we will see exactly how our other players are going to respond. A big Protect coming out from Brock's Charizard. Maybe, you know, predicting some incoming damage, but as you called it, Gabby, there's the Fake Out onto the Grimmsnarl, so we won't get a chance to see what that does quite yet. And that Protect was perfect, as it is going to be a Max Rock Ball coming in for that Charizard. It's an interesting move to have on a Charizard, because it usually comes from Ancient Power, which is a base 60 special attacking move. Does give you the opportunity to boost all your stats occasionally, but once you take on the Gigantamax form, Max Rock Ball is just perfect for taking down these flying type Pokemon like Charizard, like Thundurus, Zapdos. You know, we've certainly seen plenty of those in the Series 12 metagame, but no speed control yet up on the field. And I think that's going to be interesting, because this turn Brock can very well go for the Gigantamax on his own Charizard if he chooses. And, you know, if it's faster than the opposing Charizard, that could be a knockout for him already. Grimmsnarl cannot be flinched a second turn in a row, which means it will have the opportunity to go for one of those screens or maybe go for something else that would help Brock's board state out. So even though the Charizard did take some damage this past turn, because he hasn't used his Dynamax yet in this match, Brock does have the opportunity to sort of play around that a little bit and possibly even switch out the Charizard for later. But, you know, Charizard, probably one of the most commonly used Gigantamax Pokemon out there. You might as well send it up to that Gigantamax size in a game like this. Absolutely, and that's what Brock is going to do right here, as Charizard does get that Gigantamax factor, and it looks a little risky because of the fact that Charizard had already taken so much damage from that Max Rock Fall, even through the Protect. But what's this? Grimmsnarl using Scary Face here, which is going to harshly drop the speed of Chongjun's Charizard, as that's a berry. That's a berry. That's a Charty Berry, I believe, to weaken this rock-type damage to the opposing Charizard. So even though Brock is able to move first, that Charizard is able to hold on, also revealing the Life Orb on Brock's Charizard. Yeah, but the Max Airstream and the Fire back there, not nearly enough to be able to knock out the Charizard, but could be in range of potentially getting knocked out to the chip from the sand.
Or maybe
just
a Darkest Lariat.
There you go. So unfortunately, that is going to do it for Brock's Gigantamax in this game number 1. And what an incredible amount of knowledge shared between these two players in just that turn.
Yeah, two very similar looking teams, but two completely different modes of operation revealed. The Charty Berry most likely indicates a more bulkier build on Chongjun's Charizard. You know, it still has a decent amount of health after taking that Max Rock Ball, otherwise that would have most certainly been a knockout. But also this Grimmsnarl, you know, not going for the defensive play, instead trying to just go for the guaranteed speed drop from that Scary Face, thinking that that would have been enough to give Brock the edge. Even though that didn't work out for him in this game 1, going into game 2, he has that information already, so that's something he could adapt to after this game is over. For now, though, I like the switch-in of the Incineroar here because it's another bulky Pokemon. Grimmsnarl could help it by throwing up a screen this turn if he decides to. Also gets access to Fake Out, could flinch the opposing Incineroar. You know, he has a lot of options here to just stall out the final turn of the Gigantamax on Chongjun's Charizard, and you know, there's only so much that Charizard could potentially do. We've already seen the Rock Ball reveal. We've seen Airstream, which means its last attack is most likely G-Max Wildfire. And even if you set up that residual damage, it's not going to do too much when there's so many fire types on the field.
Yeah, we will see the parting shot first, though, after we do see one of those screens go up. And so now we will see a pivot coming in from Chongjun's side, where what's it going to be that is going to come out in that Incineroar's place? There are a lot of really nice options here. I'm thinking about a restricted, and there it is. It's going to be the Groudon here to also clear up the weather, but also wreak havoc when it comes to that damage output.
Exactly. That Incineroar cannot intimidate that Groudon as it's already on the field, and this G-Max Wildfire will certainly benefit from that sun.
Absolutely. That's going to be more than enough to knock out this Grimmsnarl right now. But more importantly, with that last turn of Gigantamax, we did see Chongjun able to set up that G-Max Wildfire damage at the end of the turn.
Exactly. And we are going to see Brock's final Pokemon coming in off of this parting shot, so we'll know pretty soon if that Pokemon's going to be taking some damage in between turns. But, you know, looking at the possible options, the Groudon, Zacian, and Gastrodon, all three of those Pokemon would be susceptible to that chip damage. So, you know, realistically speaking here, we could see Chongjun, you know, switch out his own Groudon if he decided to do so, get his Incineroar back in, intimidate the opposing Incineroar and Brock's final Pokemon in the Groudon. And then from there, you just, because Brock cannot switch his Pokemon around, he's just going to be taking more and more damage as he can deal less and less damage throughout the turn. So Chongjun just did a fantastic job with that pivot there, recognizing that if all went well, Brock would be down to his final two Pokemon, and being able to switch in an Incineroar is always, you know, a very nice thing when you're staring down a physical attacker like a Groudon.
Absolutely, and especially when, you know, Groudon have a couple of different builds these days. So some of them will carry Sword Stance in order to be able to negate something like an Intimidate drop, or maybe they're just more bulky so that they can use the Sword Stance to really beef up their physical attack. So we're gonna have to see how that is going to play out here, but one thing's for sure, Brock is locked into that Groudon and that Incineroar for the rest of this game.
Yeah, I feel like Brock certainly does have a few outs here. You know, it's not necessarily over. Both Incineroar and Groudon have plenty of health. I think the only disadvantage that he has is that Chongjun does still have the ability to switch. You know, he still has all four of his Pokemon on, not on the field, but, you know, available to him to send out onto the field. And really, unfortunately, like, Groudon is going to struggle to find that one-hit knockout onto an Incineroar. So realistically, if Chongjun does decide to switch out his Groudon for the Incineroar, or maybe the Charizard even, you know, he picks it up a little bit, that means that the Incineroar should be able to take one ground-type attack and then parting shot, and then you get another attack drop, and then you get another Intimidate. Like, it's very easy to just have these things roll into each other from here on out.
Yeah, the cycle continues, but this was a really smart choice here from Brock to be able to use the Fake Out into the Groudon to ensure that it wasn't going to attack this turn. And a nice Rock Slide here as well will catch the Incineroar on the switch-in.
It will, and do a nice amount of chip damage, but unfortunately I think we would have needed to have seen something like a Precipice Blades or just some more offensive power in order for Brock to find his way around. That being said, you know, certainly we don't know how these Pokemon match up speed-wise at this point in time, and where there is a Rock Slide, there is a way, I'm told. That seems to be something we say at least once a stream. But I think it would be really tough for Brock to come back from this point unless he got insanely lucky. So I think what he has to be thinking about here is what pieces of information does he need to win game 2, knowing that these teams just seem so similar.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you can see the berry proc there, though, on the Incineroar as the Precipice Blades does come through. Shuka Berry as another piece of information that Chongjun is going to be able to gather from this game as a huge amount of damage comes through onto the Groudon. It's not enough, I feel like, to put you in a position where Precipice Blade's double hit is going to really put you back into the game, but it's a nice bit of information revealed about how maybe that Groudon could be trained.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it shows that this Groudon is on the bulkier side of things, and that's exactly what you have to assume, I think, right now, until proven otherwise. One of the things about the metagame as it's looking like right now, this weekend of Salt Lake City, is that it seems like a lot of these Groudon are going for these bulkier builds, you know, foregoing moves like Swords Dance, knowing that, yeah, I might get intimidated into oblivion, but rather than try and offset it with my own attack boost, maybe I can just stay on the field long enough and Precipice Blades enough time so that I win. And that's exactly what we're seeing Chongjun do here, as Incineroar is able to hold on with just 2 HP after that Precipice Blades.
Wow, Incineroar hangs on just long enough to be knocked out by its own Flare Blitz here, but it's definitely going down fighting. But that is going to mean Chongjun wins the very first game of this round number 5.
I gotta say, I really loved that last turn switch from Chongjun, just sending that Charizard back in. Kept his last Pokemon secret, which I think is really important in a matchup like this. You know, we saw Brock bring Grimmsnarl as his 4th Pokemon in this matchup. We don't know what that last Pokemon was for Chongjun, so as a result, I think that he has the opportunity to sort of respond to the Grimmsnarl, whereas Brock is like, okay, I know 3 of these Pokemon that my opponent brought, but depending on why that Grimmsnarl was brought for him in that game 1, you know, it's possible that he's in a position where he just has to bring it again. I think that the Scary Face is a really interesting idea, and I think that if it wasn't for that Charty Berry we saw on the opposing Charizard, that would have been a fantastic play for him. But we didn't really see that light screen pay off. You know, the Scary Face just didn't really make sense, unfortunately, knowing that Charizard was able to survive. So I think you have to go back to the drawing table and maybe try and figure out what that last Pokemon was. I'm assuming it has to be the Zacian or the Gastrodon, just looking at this matchup. And then maybe leave Grimmsnarl behind for your own Gastrodon or Zacian, depending on how you feel about this team.
Zacian makes the most sense to me, just to make sure that you have enough power in the back, because it is such a fast Pokemon. You know that it's going to be getting out that damage, but we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. I mean, it is about the mental game sometimes. What do you think your opponent is going to bring in response to what you brought? Do you try to counterplay that? And there's definitely a lot of things to consider when thinking about what to pivot to or what changes you want to make.
Yeah, and it also must be really hard for these trainers in particular, knowing how similar these teams are. Like, you know your own personal preferences and your own personal biases going into team building and how you approach the game. And I would imagine, speaking from my own experience, it's very easy to project that onto the opponent and be like, well, I like my Zacian this way, so if my opponent's Zacian is like that, then I would play like this, only to find out, oh, just kidding, my opponent actually prefers a very fast Zacian. So yeah. But that's just the game we play. You know, a lot of these matches come down to information, and especially when you're at the undefeated tables this far in the tournament, it really is that information game that you have to play. So as they go into team preview, as we figure out, you know, how exactly both these trainers are going to approach this game too, I think that Chongjun has that benefit, again, of having that last Pokemon being kept a secret, and I would love to just, you know, see what that last Pokemon is going to be, maybe in a later turn of the second game. I think you have to go with the same lead if you're him. That Incineroar and that Charizard just worked out fantastic for him. And, you know, maybe if you're Brock, you just match that.
I feel like there are other... Grimmsnarl is such a good lead. Like, Grimmsnarl or Incineroar, I feel like either of those Pokemon are really good at supporting the Pokemon that you've put the faith in to deal your damage output. And so in this situation, if that's for the most part going to be Charizard, because you can Gigantamax it and get that extra chip with the G-Max Wildfire, then Grimmsnarl might not be a bad choice for Chongjun to also pivot to, but it's as it was in game number 1 for Chongjun. We will see that Charizard and that Incineroar, and what's this? I guess Brock wants to take a page out of Chongjun's book here.
Yeah, I don't see any Mr. Mimes on the field, but I feel like I am seeing a little bit of mirroring going on. But no, I think this is a great adaptation for him because he does have, you know, the Incineroar on the field with the threat of his own parting shot. He could certainly lower the special attack of the opposing Charizard. And honestly, if Brock went for another turn 1 protect on that Charizard, you know, foregoing the Gigantamax and just making sure the Charizard was around for a second turn, you could easily go for the parting shot into the opposing Charizard, assuming you don't flinch from the opposing Incineroar. Get your Grimmsnarl on the field, and then set up Light Screen just a turn earlier, so that way you do have that boosted defense. It's hard to say if that's what he's going to go for. I imagine matching the turn 1 Gigantamax and just going for Max Guard over Protect is also tempting, given that Charizard on Brock's side of the field didn't even get those 3 turns in game 1. But it looks like we're not seeing a double Gigantamax.
No, we're not. We're seeing a Protect again coming out from Brock's Charizard just to make sure that it doesn't get too much damage taken here. But a Fake Out coming in from Chongjun's Incineroar. That's going to be a lot of damage onto the Incineroar without it being able to do anything back.
Exactly, and thanks to that max airstream from that Charizard, that now means that Chongjun's Charizard is definitely faster than Brock's. So no Scary Face or Light Screen to possibly save him from that big damage from the max Rock Fall. So unfortunately, I think Brock has to either go for a switch or otherwise just accept that this Charizard's going to be knocked out this turn. You know, maybe, assuming you do have that Groudon in the back, maybe you just start looking to that as your potential Dynamax target and hope that, you know, the Incineroar is not going to be around to intimidate you too much. But this lead of the Charizard and the Incineroar from Chongjun's side of the field has such a presence, and being able to call that Fake Out and get that airstream really puts the beginning of the momentum in this game in Chongjun's favor.
I'm seeing a bit of a repeat of game number 1, though, that, you know, there was a bit of a passive turn coming out from Brock on that first turn, and now turn 2 is really where Brock is starting to step on the gas a little bit. Here's that Gigantamax Charizard once again.
Here it is, and we'll have to see if it sticks around. It's still at full health this time.
Oh, wow, but look, Chongjun's Charizard is going to go for the Max Rockfall first. It's going to go right into the Charizard. It barely hangs on here.
Oh, it's going to get 1 attack in, but the question is, what is that attack?
And is it enough? It's going to be a Max Rockfall, a Charty Berry again from Chongjun's Charizard to be able to eat up some of that damage. Oh man, this looks risky.
Yeah, it would have had to be a critical hit, and even then, I don't think it would have come close. That Charty Berry is such a fantastic item, and even with the boosted damage of the Life Orb on Brock's Charizard, it's just not enough to get that knockout.
Here's the parting shot. So Chongjun's Incineroar, we're just kind of watching game number 1 play out again, where Chongjun's ready for the pivot here, and we'll be bringing out something else in that Incineroar's place. It looks like it's the Zacian this time around, though, than the Groudon.
So that's already an adaptation, and depending on what Brock's Incineroar went for here, a parting shot into the Zacian honestly would have been a really interesting choice, but instead, Throat Chop trying to prevent the opposing Incineroar from being able to parting shot, which it doesn't seem like it's a sound-based move, but apparently it is, and moves like Throat Chop can shut that down.
Yeah, that's a really, really smart strategy. Unfortunately, Incineroar had switched out at that point, and so that might be a bit more information for Brock as well, because we have seen Chongjun's Incineroar move first more often than not when they were both out on the field.
Yeah, I haven't been paying attention to the ability activation, since that's another way you can get a feel for which Pokemon is faster. But honestly, that really comes back to the turn 1 airstream from Chongjun's Charizard, as at that +1 speed, you know, even if these Incineroar were speed ties, or possibly even if his Incineroar was slower, that was enough to ensure the faster Incineroar, which meant the parting shot, which meant you get even another Intimidate. You know, a lot has changed since our last regional championship here in the US, but I feel like these Incineroar just going in and out and just hanging out, you know, being cool cats, that's still the same.
Yeah, it's always a revolving door of Pokemon.
It really is.
Unfortunately, Groudon there setting the weather might have backfired on it just a little bit with the G-Max Wildfire that it just took. Will be able to connect its Precipice Blades onto the Incineroar, yep.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that Intimidate just meant, and the Shucka Berry as well, just meant it did 0 damage. And at least Brock gets an opportunity here to pivot that Incineroar out, but unless that last Pokemon can take on 2 Fire-type Pokemon in the Sun, I don't know. Zacian is a fantastic restricted Pokemon, but this is like the one situation where unfortunately it's not as fantastic.
I think that turn 1 Max Airstream as well was just so pivotal to Chongjun's game plan here, because just like that Groudon took all of that damage from the G-Max Wildfire and did just get knocked out to its residual, as Zacian is also not full health either because of that.
No, I mean, speed control is always an important part of your board state in this game. You know, the Pokemon that are faster, whether it's just because they're naturally faster, whether it's because of a Tailwind or a speed boost off an Airstream, or maybe even a Trick Room where you twist the dimensions and the slower Pokemon move first. Like, that's always going to give you a solid advantage. And especially when you're dealing with the situation that you and your opponent have 6 of the same Pokemon, potentially, you know, trained the same way. Even you have to make sure that you have that advantage, and I think that Chongjun absolutely made the right call with that Airstream early on. You know, even though the Pokemon have switched around enough that it's no longer active on the field, and you know, we actually did see the Incineroar move first for once. It's just the fact that all the Pokemon that deal the damage are now gone. This Zacian is really going to struggle to find the opportunity to make up for that.
Well, Zacian is trying its best with that Behemoth Blade, and it will be enough to get the knockout onto Chongjun's Charizard. But there's still that 4th and final Pokemon that Chongjun has not revealed yet.
Yeah, and that Zacian, it could still be knocked out by a Flare Blitz from the opposing Incineroar. If that last Pokemon is the Groudon, then that means you also have to worry about Precipice Blades. And I mean, mind you, Precipice Blades can miss. But even if it missed this turn, if Zacian misses the knockout on the opposing Incineroar because the fighting type attack it presumably has doesn't deal enough damage, a Flare Blitz would be enough to seal the knockout. But, you know, Zacian choosing to stick with the Behemoth Blade, the signature move, to try and get some big damage down onto Groudon, but I don't know, it's looking like we might need a bit of a Precipice Blades miracle, or, you know, just forego it entirely.
Yeah, Fire Punch there just to make sure that that Incineroar gets knocked out, and then a Parting Shot as well onto the Zacian just to continue to diminish the amount of damage that this Zacian is going to be able to do here.
And this is how you handle a Zacian matchup. You want to make sure that the Zacian can't benefit from the attack boost from Intrepid Sword. You want to sort of punish it for wanting to stick around on the field, and Incineroar is just the perfect Pokemon to do that. As it is done in many metagames at this point, you can send it in with the Intimidate, drop the attack, you can switch it out manually, you can switch it out with Parting Shot. You know, I've also seen a lot of people start to do like Will-O-Wisp or something to lower that Zacian's attack, because once the attack has been lowered enough, you know, there's only so much it can do as a Pokemon, and, you know, unfortunately,